Hi, Maxine Bamber here, showing you a granny square crochet tutorial. Starting off with a slip knot. This is one of the simpler ways to do a slip knot. Once you have your slip knot made, pull the working yarn cord over your hook to tighten. And now you are ready to start crocheting. This is how I hold my working yarn. If you find a different way works better for you, feel free to do that. Starting off with chaining 4. You're yarning over from behind the hook to in front and pulling that yarn through your loop that is on your hook. Yarning over, pulling through. I like to use my right hand pointer finger to hold the yarn in place on my hook so it is more stable. You should have 4 chains on your hook. Yarn over to start your double crochet. Insert your hook into the first chain. Yarn over, pull through your chain. Now you have 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over again and pull through 2 of those loops on your hook. Now you have 2 loops on your hook. Yarn over and pull through the last 2. You've completed your first double crochet. You should have your 4 chains and your first double crochet, and now we will do a second double crochet in the same first chain. Now you've completed 2 double crochets in your first chain. This counts as 1 cluster, our 4 chains and our 2 double crochets. Now that you've finished a cluster, you chain 1, start your second cluster in the same first chain. Now you've completed 3 double crochets in the same first chain, creating your second cluster. We need 4 clusters to finish this round. Chain 1 to finish your cluster, and start your third cluster in the same first chain. We now have 3 clusters out of the 4. Again, a cluster is 3 double crochets or 2 double crochets in 3 chains, making our last cluster here in the same starting chain. Last cluster is done. We chain 1, and now we have to connect our ends. You're going to find the top of your 4 starting chains, insert your hook into that top chain. If you find this difficult to find, you can also insert your hook in between your chains and your first double crochet and do a slip stitch, which is yarning over and pulling through the chain and the loop on your hook. Starting our second round, we're chaining 3. This counts as 1 double crochet. And we're going to go back into the space behind the chains, in between our first cluster and our last. Another 2 double crochets will complete this cluster. And we are done our first cluster. Start your second cluster in the next space underneath the chain. Put your hook through that space, yarn over, pull through, and yarn over, pull through 2 and 2 again. You're going to do your 3 double crochets to make 1 cluster in this space. Once you've done that, you're going to finish with the chain, of course, and start your second cluster in that same space. So 2 clusters in this space will create your corner, making this round into a square. You've got your first corner. So here I couldn't remember if I chained or not, and to tell, just look at your stitch. You see 2 notches there where you should only see 1. If you don't see 1, then that means you have not chained. So we're chaining because we finished the cluster and we're starting our next corner and the next space underneath the chain that we did in the previous round. A good way to find the space to put your hook in is by stretching your stitches so that you can see where that chain is. The chain will make a gap in between the stitches. Another way is to count your posts. 1 post is 1 double crochet. Every cluster is 3 double crochets, so every 3 posts there should be a chain space. Again, we're doing 2 clusters in this corner, which is 3 double crochets, a chain, another 3 double crochets, and a chain. Your squares should be really taking form now. On to the next corner. Now we have completed 3 corners, and where we started there is just 1 cluster. We need to finish by putting the second cluster in that corner. So you start and finish in the same stitch. Chain 1, and now you've got to connect your ends. Again, find the top of your chains, insert your hook, yarn over, pull through the chains, and pull through the loop on your hook. And that is a slip stitch. Now you've got a square. Third round, chaining 3 again, double crocheting into the space behind our chains, not in front. Just 2 double crochets needed here to make a cluster. Chain 1, and now we're actually going into a middle space. It is not a corner, so we only need 1 cluster in this middle space. If you did 2, you would be changing the whole shape of this piece. So 3 double crochets into this center space. Off to our next corner. Remember to always chain 1 after each cluster or set of 3 double crochets to finish it. As you can see, in the corners I'm doing 2 clusters to form that square, and in the we're going to continue this around the entire piece until you get back to the first cluster that you made in the first corner. Doing 2 clusters in each corner and just 1 in the centers. You can use your stitch markers to mark where your corners are. That way every time you reach a stitch marker you know that you have to do 2 clusters in that spot. Move your stitch markers into the new corner that you make so that it doesn't get lost or confusing. Sometimes when you make a mistake like this, it's easier to just pull it out until you're back to where it looks right and try again. That's the best part about crocheting. Super easy to fix mistakes, especially with yarn that can split like this one. Continue this around until you get to your starting cluster, and I'll meet you back. Finishing our last cluster in the same space that we started our first cluster and joining together with a slip stitch. Now we were going to be doing round 4, starting with our chain 3, counting as 1 double crochet, double crocheting into the space behind our chains, 2 double crochets in this one to make a cluster, and off to the next space. Now we have 2 spaces in between each corner. We will be doing 1 cluster or 3 double crochets into each of those spaces in between the corners. We've done our clusters in the spaces, and now we're going to do our next corner. Same as before, 3 double crochets, chain 1, another 3 double crochets, chain 1 in the same spot. Continue this pattern all the way around until you get back to your starting cluster, and I'll meet you back. We are doing our final attachment slip stitch. We've got a completed square. Congratulations. We are going to cut our working yarn to make another tail. About that long. You want it long enough so that you can weave it in and hide it properly. And to tie off, you can just pull the cord out right now using your crochet hook, just pull it out. But I like to do an extra chain and then pull the yarn out. Just gives it a bit more security, especially with these squares. You don't want those falling apart. And you're done. Good job, everyone. You can do this.